Over in Acts, we're going to be looking in chapter 17 tonight. In Acts chapter 17. Tonight, we're going to be thinking about the Athenian mindset within that chapter. And we'll get to the passage itself in just a moment. But I would like to begin by I want you to think about the topic of conspiracies. And I would suggest that in this day and age of internet, it seems like we're just surrounded by conspiracies, that we hear about them all the time. But I wanted you to just think about a certain mindset and just think about some of the conspiracies that we hear about. So to look at them, you all know who that is up on the screen? That is Kyrie Irving, ball player for the Brooklyn Nets. He made waves a couple years ago because he believed at that time that the earth is flat, and made headlines. A lot of folks look up to him. A lot of young folks look up to him. And this is his quote. He says, "This is not a conspiracy. The earth is flat. All these things that particular groups, and I won't pinpoint one group, they almost offer up this education. The fact that in our lifetimes that there are so many holes and so many pockets in our history. Is the earth flat or round? You need to do research on it. They lie to us." You know, it kind of makes you ask the question, who's the they there? They lie. Who's the they? But it made headlines. And you have that conspiracy that's out there, the flat earthers who believe such things. And my point in mentioning these things is not to mock the conspiracies. I just want you to see the mindset as we think about it. Another thing that's been out there the last couple of years, what you see up on the screen, those are cell towers. Those are the newer 5G cell towers that over in Europe people were starting to set fire to because they thought the 5G cell towers were causing COVID. And that was making the rounds. Okay. Conspiracies. You've probably heard of people who believe in secret societies, New World Order stuff, Illuminati stuff, things like that. I have a brother who used to work for R.R. Donnelly's in Crawfordsville, and he was telling me about a book that they printed over there, and it was a book for the QAnon movement. And he was telling me about some of the things in that book, and and we've all heard it if we turn on the news, that there were things in that book that talked about political parties, different people in political parties, sacrificing babies, drinking babies' blood, and actually certain members of certain parties and certain people in places of authority actually being reptiles. And it's just, wow. And we're not even making any of this up. This is what people believe. I remember I talked to a fellow just in the last few weeks who was a member of the church who was talking about the Bible code. Y'all ever hear someone talk about the Bible code? And it's some sort of code, and he said that when you apply it to the Old Testament, that it talked about Hitler, and it talked about the Vietnam War, and it talked about World War II, and it talked about all these different things. And when you input certain things into this code, and it came back, and it just scared him, because when he put this code in, he found that his own children's names were actually recorded in Scripture. But one of his children, he had 2 children, and one of his children, every place that code popped up, it was all good things. But then his other child, it was all bad things. So he didn't know what to make of it. And what he said to me was, he said, "Now I'm never going to preach on it, but it's interesting." And I'm just sitting there thinking, I wish you wouldn't have even told me about it. But he was absolutely serious about such things. Former QAnon supporter to Cooper Anderson says, "I apologize for thinking that you ate babies." Really? And it's just conspiracies. Like I said, the point that I'm making is not to mock these ideas. That's not the point at all. But it's just the mindset. The mindset that goes down this path. and these paths, and it can just be a scary thing and a sad thing. And I would suggest in the last 2.5 years, if you understand what I'm talking about, with the virus, that there have been all sorts of different conspiracies surrounding that. And it's just a mindset. Now, we will say this: are all conspiracies false? No, no. Some conspiracies actually turn out to be true. In 44 BC, someone really was trying to kill Caesar. The whole et tu, Brute. Someone really was trying to kill him. And someone really did kill him. Some conspiracies are actually true. But when it comes down to it, I think it's sort of like what Jesus spoke about when he was talking about the things that would happen surrounding Jerusalem and elsewhere. When the Lord said, "And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, see that you are not troubled." And I think that is very sound and very good advice. That you will hear of wars. You will hear of rumors of wars. Some things will be true. Some things may not be true. But we serve the Lord. We serve the Lord. And so we set our mind on heavenly things. See that you are not troubled. How do people go down this rabbit hole? This rabbit hole. And I've done it myself, frankly, with 1 or 2 different conspiracy theories. And as I look back on that time in my life, you just think about, well, what sort of mindset did I have? And that brings us back to the Athenians. The mindset that the Athenians had in Acts chapter 17. And it's just interesting because, no, they were not conspiracy theorists. That's not what I'm saying. Because they weren't. But I'd like to retitle the sermon. Rather than thinking about the Athenian mindset, I'd like to give it the title of An Appetite for the Sensational. Because I think that very much was the Athenians. That they had an appetite for the sensational. So, what we're going to do, we're going to make a few points from Acts chapter 17, and I want you to just see if it doesn't sound familiar to how people think today. So let's read a little bit. In Acts chapter 17 at verse 16. It says, "Now while Paul waited for them at Athens," talking about his partners, "his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. Therefore he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers, and in the marketplace daily with those who happened to be there. Then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him, and some said, 'What does this babbler want to say?' Others said, 'He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods, because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection.' And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, 'May we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak, for you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore we want to know what these things mean. For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing.' And then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus." And we'll read the remainder of it here after a moment. But as we think about the points that we want to make, he finds himself here in Athens. And what we have the Epicurean and the Stoic philosophers. You have Epicureans who, they're kind of the high on the hog people. They believe that life is all about living the high life. It is where we get the word epicure. So they are all about the pleasures of life. That's what they are all about. Mind and body, they are about pleasure. Well, then the Stoics are at the opposite end of the spectrum. They think feelings, frankly, that it doesn't matter. We use the word stoic even now when someone is very solemn and not showing any emotion. But as we think about these two groups of philosophers, the Epicureans and the Stoics, I think what we see is it's extremism. It is opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about extremists. The Epicureans said, it's all this, and the Stoics said, no, it's all that. And you have these two mindsets here in Athens. Then we ask the question, okay, well, where does the truth lie? And where does the truth usually lie? The truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. And as we think about the idea, and we just ask a few questions, should we enjoy life? When Scripture says, when Paul is writing to Timothy, and it's giving commandments to those who are rich. Command those who are rich that they be rich in good works. But at the same time, it says that God has richly given us all things to enjoy. God has blessed us abundantly. So should we enjoy life? Should we enjoy God's blessings? And the answer is yes. Absolutely, we should enjoy life. But then, what about, should we deny ourselves? Well, wait a minute. We're supposed to enjoy life, but we know what Jesus said, and he said it numerous times. If any man wants to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Well, wait a minute. Am I supposed to enjoy life? Or I don't understand it. It seems like there's a contradiction. And I would suggest there's no contradiction. What we need to understand is that rather than looking at it as a life of luxury or a life of neglect, because that's the Epicureans and the Stoics, we need to understand that self-denial does not mean self-flagellation. You all know what self-flagellation is? The idea that you punish yourself out of some sort of penitence, and that idea that, and you punish yourself. We've seen down historically where people have had that idea. But that is not the self-denial that we're called to have. We are not supposed to be self-flagellists like that. And it is not luxurious to mind our own business and to work with our own hands what is good, to see to our own needs and to be able to share with others. It is not living luxuriously to have a job and to have a roof over our head and to have transportation. With food and clothing, we shall be content. That is not living luxuriously. Self-denial does not mean self-flagellation. We deny ourselves, namely, we're following the Lord as He is Lord, and what He says we do. But we learn contentment. We learn contentment, but at the same time, that allows us to live generously with others. And we're able to share with others. And a couple ideas come to mind. One is the idea of moderation in all things, which is a scriptural idea. That in all things be temperate. That idea. And do you see how that, when you're dealing with Epicureans and Stoics, and then someone comes along and says, be disciplined, but be moderate in all things. Rather than saying it's all this or it's all that, it's like, no, moderation. Be content with a little, but at the same time, hopefully we understand a little bit about how the Lord wants us to live. We know what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season. Everything has a season under the sun. We understand. The Epicureans and the Stoics didn't believe that. They didn't believe that everything had its season. They believed it was all this or all that. And it's extremism. Now, as much as we're talking about Epicureans and Stoics, what I want you to see is just the mindset. The extremist mindset. And is extremism still rampant in the world today? And it certainly is. You see it all the time. The mindset of extremism, I would suggest it can affect every facet of our lives. Just think about work. Is it possible to overwork? That was one of the lessons the Jews had to learn in the Old Testament. There is a time to work. What was it? In 6 days you shall do your work. But then was there also a time to rest from their labors? And you have the Sabbath. Now, Is there a time to sit down on Jacob's well? Certainly. But should we stay on Jacob's well? No. Moderation. Moderation. Everything has its season. But with extremism, there is no middle ground. There's just no middle ground. And that sounds very familiar. That sounds very familiar to the day and the age that we find ourselves living in. That is the Epicureans and the Stoics. All right, read verse 21 again. For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. It's all about telling or hearing some new thing. If you want to pique, if you want to get someone's attention, you know what you say? You say, I've got a secret. And if you tell people, I've got a secret, what is their response going to be? Their response is going to be, oh, well, tell me your secret. Right? Just tell them, say, I got a secret. What is it? What is it? What is that little nugget of information? And not only do I want to hear this secret, but once I hear that secret, then what do I get to do? Then I get to share that secret with others. And once I get to share that secret with others, oh, then all of a sudden I'm the secret bearer. And that makes me special. Because now I'm the one who has the secret. So here these folks are, here in Athens. They spend all their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. So you have the telling and the hearing, and now we're going to be in it together. Right? I've got the secret, and now I've shared the secret with you. And now what do we have? Now we have our own little club. Now we have our own little club, and we're the ones who are in the know now. And everybody else, what are they? Oh, they don't know what we know. And now what are they? You know, one of the sad things that you'll hear it from time to time. You ever hear people called sheep? Not in the setting of the church, but just in society. Oh, they're just sheep. Sometimes I'll hear Christians say, "Oh, well, we don't want to just be sheep," and you just got to stop and think about that. Wait a minute, I thought we were actually called to be sheep. I thought we were supposed to be sheep. I thought we were supposed to be, the sheep of the Lord's fold. It's not wrong to be a sheep. What we should not want to be are goats. Now, what's the difference between a sheep and a goat? Well, sheep feed in the Lord's pasture. But what will a goat swallow? Goats will swallow just about anything. We don't want to be goats. It is not a bad thing to be the Lord's sheep, because the Lord feeds us. The Lord feeds us. But here these folks are, and they want to tell or hear some new thing. Here's the problem with that. This newly found secret. What happens when the newness wears off? That's the problem. That's the problem. Leave your finger here in Acts chapter 17, but come back to Numbers 21. I think I wrote the verse down, but just flip pages a little bit. I think I wrote the correct verse down. Come back to Numbers 21. I think it's one of the sadder passages in the Old Testament. To me, there's a lot of sad passages, a lot of passages that bring great joy, but this one does not bring great joy. This is Numbers 21 at verse 5. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. They said, "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread." What bread were they talking about? They were talking about the manna. They said, "We have no food, and our soul loathes this worthless bread." Are you kidding? The bread that the Lord had given them. Other passages talk about it being an angel's food. And they say, our soul loathes it. It had become old to them. Rather than appreciating it, and when it first happens and they come and they say, well, what is it? If you're You ever want to see a funny word study or see a funny definition, look up what the word manna literally means. Because it seems like it literally means, if I'm remembering correctly, something like that. It's a very generic word. Look it up. It's hilarious. But the Lord sends the manna, right? And He says, okay, you're going to get it for 6 days. Now, on the 6th day, gather twice as much. Don't go out on the 7th day, right? And lo and behold, we know what they try to do. They try to go out on that 7th day, and it doesn't work out too well. But it got to a point where they actually said, our soul loathes this worthless bread. What happens when the new wears off? What happens when cars get old? And this is where the rubber starts hitting the road. What happens when cars get old? Well, if you're not living in a time of 9% inflation, you get a new car. What happens when houses get old? What happens when spouses get old? What happens when churches get old? Well, if you have this appetite for the sensational, what will happen is you'll say, man, that Church of Christ, that's just boring. It's just the same old, same old. They get together on each Sunday and they take the Lord's Supper and they bring their offering and they sing, but they don't have the praise band, they don't have the dancers, they don't have this, they don't have that, they don't. And they're just not content. They're just not content with it. And that's the problem. This mindset, telling or hearing some new thing, it can affect every facet of our lives, I would suggest. I think it's very similar to what Paul told Timothy. Come over and I'll just reference it. Remember when Paul's writing to Timothy? Yeah, I will read it. It's over in 2 Timothy. When he's talking about the mindset that people were having. This is 2 Timothy chapter 3, and I'll just read it quickly. It says, For of this sort are those who creep into households and make captives of gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. Here's the phrase I wanted to notice. Always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Always learning. Just in the next chapter, chapter 4, it speaks about the apostasy that was going to happen. According to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they're going to heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. And once you start going down that road of fables, y'all have probably heard preachers say your whole lives, if it takes a hamburger to get them in the door, what is it going to take to keep them? It's going to take a steak to keep them. But eventually the steak's going to get old. And then what is it going to take? And then what is it going to take? It's always going to take something new, right? Because they've never learned. They have never learned to be satisfied. And that's what we're really talking about. This is the problem. Back in Acts, these folks, they spent all their time and nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. Are they ever going to be satisfied that way? It's sort of like silver. Those who love silver, what will they not be satisfied with? They won't be satisfied with it. And this is sadly what happens. That is one of the problems with always wanting the new. The new becomes old. And then you move on. And you're just never satisfied. You're never content with what you have. Here in Acts 17, I don't want to read the whole thing quite yet, but look down later in the account, verse 32. Have you ever wondered, there in verse 32 it says, And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, while others said, We will hear you again on this matter. At that point, what would you do? When someone says, We will hear you again on this matter. It's like, all right, I got my foot in the door. I'm not going anywhere. They actually say they want to hear me again on this matter. It's like, okay, Paul, set up shop right there in Athens. But there's a slight problem with that, and it's the next verse. They say, We will hear you again on this matter. And verse 33, so Paul departed from among them. So you know the question that you have to ask. Why? Why did he leave when they said, We will hear you again on this matter? And it's somewhat speculative, just kind of guessing. But the only thing I can come up with is Paul knew what sort of mindset they had. And that from the get-go they say, oh, this is something new. We want to hear about it. But they're just treating the truth like a new shiny toy. And I have a feeling Paul knew they're not really appreciating it. Otherwise, why would he leave? I think Paul knew who he was dealing with, and he knew the sort of mindset that they had. And as long as they had this mindset that they had, they're never going to be satisfied. Will we be content with the truth? The truth is so simple. It's so simple. But sometimes folks just don't have appreciation for the simplicity that is the truth. And we have to learn to be content with it. Because if we just want to hear and tell new things, well, then we're just like the Athenians. We have that appetite for the sensational, the new thing, the new shiny thing. Lastly, here in Acts 17, verse 21, again, for all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. They spent all their time, it says. It consumed them. That's what it did. They spent their time. The Athenians and the foreigners who were there, they spent their time in nothing else. It absolutely consumed them. Just a sad thing. Their extremism consumed them. Their desire for this newness consumed them. They were never satisfied. And they spent all their time doing this. They spent their time in nothing else than these things. Their man-made wisdom. This is Athens. This is Greece. This is, Alexander the Great. All of that was before this. The fellow who taught Alexander the Great. All of those philosophers, that's Athens. Their man-made wisdom just consumed them. Their extremism and all of these other things. And as you look at that list up on the screen, does that not sound like society today? Extremism, secret knowledge that we know that, right? I know it, you don't know. Never satisfied and just consumed by them. We'll add one more thing to that list. I want you to think about fear. Did fear not also play a factor? Paul's going through Athens, and what does he see? All the idols. Well, how did they think about their idols? They didn't think about their idols the same way that we think about God. Not to say that there were not times where God did not deal with places like Sodom and Gomorrah. But the way they looked at their gods, they were so afraid of their gods that they even had an idol to the unnamed God. And Paul says, the one that you don't know, I'm going to tell you about him. But they were so afraid of missing one God that they have an idol for all of them. And they lived in fear of their gods. Did that not also play a factor in all of this? Their society was based on that. Right? You don't want to make the gods mad. You don't want to do that. As you think about our list, and it's just interesting, because that is somewhat society today. Obviously, the problem's the internet, right? No, the internet, I would suggest, right? The problem's not Facebook. The problem's not Instagram. The problem's not YouTube. The problem's not TikTok. It might be TikTok. That's another lesson. But the problem's not social media. Those things are platforms. And those platforms, frankly, aren't really all that much different than the Areopagus. They're not really that much different than Mars Hill. Why would Paul go into the synagogues? Why would Paul go to the Areopagus? Why would Paul go to the marketplace? It's because he was looking for a platform. It's because he had something that he wanted to share to. And if he had an opportunity to share it, then he is going to go to that place and share it. Right? And that's what he did. So don't think, oh, the problem's the internet. The internet's just a tool. It's just a platform. That's all it is. And it's a platform that a lot of people use. It's a platform that a lot of people are tuned into. And so we try to share the gospel anywhere and everywhere. Anywhere we have an opportunity, that's what we try to do. But sometimes you have to do sort of like Paul did, because sometimes people will say, they'll just want to argue about it all day long. And Paul says, nope, I'm moving on. I'm moving on. And he moved on. Let's read the remainder of the account. Verse 22. Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. Therefore the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord, in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said. For we are also his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art, man's devising. Truly these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, while others said, We will hear you again on this matter. So Paul departed from among them. However, some men joined him and believed, among them Dionysius the Areopagite, a woman named Damaris, and others with him. So some did believe. Paul had an opportunity. Some just wanted to play around with it. But there were some who heard the truth, believed the truth, and obeyed the truth. I wanted you to key in on verse 26. Verse 26, He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. That verse, He has determined their pre-appointed times. The question I had when doing this lesson was, why mention that? Why mention that little tidbit? A lot of times we'll use that verse and we'll pull it out of context. And I try to put it back in context, think about why would he say this here? And I want you to just consider, as you think about, he has determined, in thinking about, he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwelling. That verse is the reason that I asked Josh to lead us in that song before the sermon, The Kingdoms of Earth Pass Away. Again, we're in Athens. We're in Greece. When you ask, what was the height of man's wisdom? What answer would people give? The height of man's wisdom. We're still talking about the philosophers some 2,000 years later. You take a philosophy class in college, and what philosophers are you going to start studying? We're still talking about these guys. We are still talking about these Greek philosophers. We're still talking about the Aristotles and the Platos and the Socrates. We're still talking about those men. The height of man's wisdom, the Greeks. That they had gotten to such a point that when Rome comes on the scene, they actually adopted so many of the Greek cultures. They didn't replace them. They actually adopted the conquered, those who were conquered, they adopted their culture. If you were in Athens and you're in Greece, how high would you think of yourself? How highly would you think of yourself? How highly do you think the Epicureans and the Stoics thought of themselves? This isn't Corinth. This isn't the factory town across the bay. This is Athens. These are the philosophers. These are the Greeks. And they lost it. We're not in the time of the Greek Empire. We're in the time of the Roman Empire. The height of man's wisdom. And were they able to hold on to the empire that they had? They lost it. How much would that infuriate you? How much would that infuriate you? Let me just ask you, not to turn this into a political debate. How proud are you of the country that we live in on a scale of 1 to 10? How horrified would you be at the thought of our nation being conquered by another nation? How horrifying would that be? And then we sing the song, "The kingdoms of earth pass away, one by one, but the kingdom of heaven remains." I wonder if the reason that the Holy Spirit through Paul is bringing this up here, he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Why has God done that? Why has God determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings? Why has God? There is no question from other passages, such as in Romans, when we think about do governments have scriptural authority to exist? The answer is yes. The answer is absolutely yes. But at the same time, they are the kingdoms of men. They're the kingdoms of man. So everything that comes with that now, so God has determined their pre-appointed times. God has authorized this system, the kingdoms of men, and everything that it contains. So what sort of things do the kingdoms of men contain? Does it contain partyism? Yeah. Does it contain extremism? Yeah. And we just think about these different philosophies that people have, pulling us one way or the other, until we don't know which way to turn, and then we read the next verse. So that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for Him and find Him. Namely, there's got to be something better than the kingdoms of men. And what is it? It's the kingdom of God. It's the better kingdom. The kingdoms of earth pass away one by one. But God's kingdom, the Lord's kingdom, that's the one that remains. That's the only one that will remain. I wonder if that's not why this idea was brought up here. If I was in Athens, if we were in Athens and we were proud of our culture, we would wonder, why did we lose to the Romans? It'd be very frustrating. And then along comes Paul, and he says, the Lord is not far from you. You might try looking for something better than this appetite for the sensation. But here's the thing. As we read the verse, as we think about the better way. Verse 30, truly these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because He has appointed a day on which He will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom He has ordained. He has given assurance to the soul by raising him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked. What will you do with the truth? What will we do with the truth? And as we think about the truth and what Paul preached, how sensational was it? Here they are, and they just want to hear something new. It's like, okay, here it is. Here's something new. The resurrection of the dead. And these guys, they're like, oh, we want some new thing. They want this sensational thing. And when they hear of the resurrection of the dead, it is so sensational that most of them can't believe it. And they mock the idea. It was too extreme even for them. They believed in the afterlife, but they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. Are there still people who don't believe in the resurrection of the dead? You better believe it. You better believe it. Some mocked, but not everybody. Too extreme, that there is more to this life, that there is more to life than just this life. And he preaches Jesus and the resurrection of the dead and judgment. And judgment. He has appointed a day. So as we offer the invitation and we think about our points and we say this, what is it that consumes us? What is it that consumes us? Is it the kingdom of God, or is it the kingdoms of men? And all that is found in the kingdoms of men. Certainly, we submit to those who are in authority as long as it doesn't contradict God. We honor the king. Doesn't mean that we agree with everything that politicians do, such things as that. We recognize all that. But at the same time, we serve a higher authority. And we set our mind on heavenly things, not on earthly things. And we recognize there is going to be a resurrection of the dead, the just and the unjust. And so we prepare ourselves for it. And that's what Paul is trying to get the Athenians to do.